With James Acaster.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Ended up saying hello to a guy just walked there. Yeah.
You're promoting a special right now, Heckler's Welcome.
Yeah, it's a show where it's a show of stories from my life and childhood, and specifically about my relationship with the audience through stand-up, and how I've struggled with that sometimes. But the audience are allowed to do whatever they like. They're told at the top of the show, normal rules don't apply. They can behave however they like. They don't have to heckle. It's not, this is the show where you have to heckle me. But if you do, you're not going to get in trouble for it. So that was the idea from the outset. Let's see what happens if I do this. And yeah, toured it for 2 years, filmed it at the end, which is what's being released now. And you get to see what it kind of turned into, I guess.
It's a particular type of person
Yeah.
who decides to heckle a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like most people in the audience probably would not take that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Were there shows where nobody heckled?
Yeah, loads of shows where nobody heckled, loads of shows when it was wall-to-wall heckling, shows when it was just one person and everyone wanting that person to shut up, but they always happen anyway. So I found that it was pretty much what I always experienced, but my reaction was different, which is what I was trying to change. I don't know, the only thing I'd be interested in is whether the people who heckled were the same people who would have heckled anyway. Because I got the same amount of heckles, but because they were allowed, I don't know if I spoilt the fun for some people who would have heckled normally, so they went, oh, I'm not going to bother. But then other people who would never heckle because it's against the rules were like, oh, we can do that, let's try it out, because thinking that might be what I wanted, I went to Sweden early on in the tour, and they usually never heckle, because they want to obey the rules of the show. But then when they were like, oh, the rules of this one are we're allowed to, if he wants that, we should do it. So then they were trying to heckle, having never heckled before in their lives, even as a nation. So very much trying to learn how to heckle in real time, which was entertaining to watch them mainly just pick me up on things that they thought I'd got wrong. It was mainly them putting their hand up and going, yeah, you said that earlier, but now you've just said that, so it doesn't make sense.
So it was logical heckling?
Yeah, and you're like, oh, that's because it was a joke. But I get what you mean, and and you got the impression they were trying to serve the show and give me the thing that I was after. So I don't know how often that happened, of the heckler being someone who would never heckle, who is now trying to help the show, and someone who would usually heckle, just going, well, what's the point if he's okay with it,
And I heard you say in an interview that doing this was kind of
immersion therapy.
Immersion therapy.
Yeah, going into it, yeah, that was the intention. Here's everything that I'm scared about. Getting ready to do comedy again. I'd had a break like a lot of people had during the pandemic, going back to it after 2 years off, and was like, I'm scared of everyone's gonna, people heckling me again, people on their phones, people not really laughing at me and just sitting there in silence, people talking to their friends while I'm on. I know I always react badly to that, and I'm scared that I'm going to go back, I'm going to feel like I'm rubbish on stage when they're doing that. I'm going to feel like I'm a shit comedian, and that's why they're talking, or that's why they're on their phones, and I'm going to act out, and I'll just repeat all the same mistakes again. And I was really worried about going back to stand-up because of that. And I knew I didn't have to at that point. I'm very lucky with the food podcast that I do with Ed Gamble. And I was like, I could just do that now, and I don't really need to be constantly doing stand-up comedy, but I did want to do it. So I was like, if I do it again, I kind of have to sort this problem out. Otherwise, it's just going to be quite a miserable career, which just doesn't make sense. It's something that should be fun and that I'm passionate about and that I love. So I was like, let's just do a show where they're allowed to do all those things and you accept that that's going to happen. So rather than racking your brains trying to go, how can I get them to stop heckling me? And how can I get them to not be on their phones and all of this? Because I've tried asking nicely every year and it doesn't work. I don't want to be putting my foot down going, put your phone in this bag and then we zip it up and nothing can get to it. And it just didn't feel like the kind of comedian I wanted to be. I don't judge comics who do that. So I thought if I let them do it, maybe that'll help. And I didn't know how it would help, but I was like, maybe that'll help me just accept it a bit more and deal with it and just face my fear of that. And by the end of the tour, so it's 2 years now, I found that I am different on stage, that when they're doing things that I don't necessarily like, it doesn't get to me as much. I don't feel as insecure about it. I'm still not, the most secure comedian. I still think that I'm that I could be way better, and that a lot of nights I'm like, oh, this, but I don't put it on them as much. I don't act out as much. I'll just come off and go, oh, I wasn't as good, or that material still needs to be better, and I'll go away and do the work, as opposed to like throwing a strop in front of them all and being like, well, why aren't you appreciating how fucking good this is, when the only reason I'm saying that is because in the back of my head I'm thinking this isn't good, you know, and needing them to like, you know, do the work for me,
Yeah.
you know, laugh so much that I believe this is good, rather than how I actually feel about the show or my own abilities. So definitely, you know, it's not like all my insecurities have gone away, but you know, the impulse to act out and to blame it on them and to throw my toys out the pram isn't there anymore when I'm on stage, and that's great.
Yeah, I feel like so many comedians blame the audience because their inner critic is projecting their own fears about themselves onto the audience.
Yeah, and there's all the reasons why we don't, like, most people don't do stand-up because they're like, well, that's terrifying. And stand-ups are not these like superhuman people who don't feel like that. Like, they are also terrified, and a lot of the time we have to not acknowledge it in ourselves, especially when we're starting out. Because if we immediately, well, for me, if I immediately straight out the gate was like, this is terrifying, I don't want to do it, I don't think I would have got up there and started doing this thing that I really wanted to do, and I really wanted to try out and see if I could do it. So I had to put it out of my head and be like, no, I'm not scared. I'm just, you know, I'm excited, and that's how I feel. I'm going to go on and have a good time and convince myself that I wasn't like everyone else who was nervous about it. But I think all comics are. I don't think it goes away. When you hear, you know, comics who've been going for decades, they're actually a lot more at ease about admitting that as well. I find a lot of the time they're, you know, regardless of how you feel about it in one way or the other. Like when you hear Jerry Seinfeld talk about stand-up, he does just say like it's a fight or flight thing that you're putting your body in every night, and he's probably took him a while to get to that point to go like, oh, that is what I'm doing to my body, and I can admit that, and it's not weak to admit that to people. So yeah, I think kind of coming to terms with that, and then not, once you're honest with yourself about how you feel, it becomes easier to not then lash out at them. I think.
Totally, yeah, because I feel like it's like, I'm speaking from my experience, like every night before I'd go out on stage, there'd be this feeling in my stomach that, like, part of my brain that would go like, you can just go, you can leave, you don't need to experience this. But there's another part of my brain that was like, no, but you do, and that's the part that I would win out each time. Like, is that, do you feel similarly based on like?
Yeah, and like during the lockdowns, when I just wasn't doing it for 2 years, I noticed how much I liked not doing it, and that I was like, oh, I actually feel a lot more relaxed and a lot less anxious all the time, and then you really have that option of like, I could just not do it anymore, and yeah, I kind of decided, I guess, I like creating the shows so much. So I like all the writing and the honing of it and developing it. And I enjoy that so much that this other part of it, which is the feeling vulnerable on stage and whatever that I don't really enjoy, if I can just figure that out, then maybe it'll be all right. So it's like, well, let's try and figure that out. Mm. And if you can't, then get out of here. But like, you know, but definitely for a while it was like, I mean, I don't think I even really acknowledge that part that you're talking about of going, I could just go. I was just not even, that part of my brain was switched off, you know.
Yeah. You mentioned about like being the comedian that you want to be, and I've you know, I've heard a lot of people describe you as like non-traditional or subversive or Andy Kaufman-esque, as far as like your style of comedy. What type of comedian do you want to be, and is that the same as it was when you started? Yeah,
definitely not the same. I think when I started, the kind of comedian I wanted to be was a lot, I had this clear thing of like, well, I like Ross Noble, I like Josie Long, there's a whole bunch of comics that I liked, that I was like, I want to be like them, and I want to be this, like, I wanted to be a affable, likable, storytelling comic. And now you don't really have as clear a thing of like, this is the kind of comedian I want to be. It's more that you are trying to figure out what your authentic voice is and who you are. And so you're just feeding into that more and more. And sometimes it is a thing where like you'll do a show and you kind of don't want to do a show like that again, you know, so you do consciously change it up for the next one and go, okay, I don't want to tell personal stories anymore. So now I'm going to just try more observational or like jokes or whatever. But that's still just coming from you and where you are at that point in your life and what you want to do. I don't think I've ever been like, oh, this is the kind of comic that I like, so I want to be that. Because then you're always trying to fit into something that's not really you. Whereas if you are like, where am I at this point in my life? What is my impulse? And if my impulse is to do this, then let's not look into it too much. Let's just do that style of comedy and see how that, if it feels right on stage. The audience know as well. They let you know if that feels like that suits you. Like, they're very intuitive, and they might not always know why, because they're not analysing it like we are. They're just going to have a good night out. But they can go like, this doesn't feel like you, and we're not, and you can see that when you watch another comic sometimes and being like, this material's good and you're good, but these things don't match up and it doesn't work. And then you might talk to that comic afterwards and go, oh yeah, you saw such and such recently and you think I should be like that. That's the kind of comic I want to be. But actually, trust your own trust your own path a bit more, but just like, you kind of can't help it. That is the route that if you go down there, it'll work the best, because that's you.
Totally. And that's why I stopped doing stand-up,
Uh-huh.
because my buddy and I, who started doing stand-up around the same time, we were high school best friends and writing partners. And I kept being like I kept trying different things, and I wasn't quite finding something that felt authentic to me. And he kept being like, well, just find stand-up that you really like and admire and try that out. And then if that doesn't work, try something else. I'm just like, that never felt right to me to copy someone else's style. So that's why I started just writing shows and working it out that way. So I guess that's my next question is, like, when you're writing a show, is it like you have a theme or a concept and then you write bits for it? Or is it like you write more short form bits and then you compile it into a larger show?
Depends with each show. It's changed over the years. Like, I think like many comics, my first stand-up show was just years of doing the open mic circuit, doing support slots for other comics, middle spots in comedy clubs, and then you just put all your best stuff into that first hour. Like, that's most comedians, not all. And then the next show was like sitting at a laptop, every day for a year, writing the routines out, practicing them in my living room, going up every night and trying the stuff, and then like forming this new hour of comedy. Because then the challenge is, can I write an hour in a year when the last one took me 5 years or whatever? So like, and then the next year I tried to replicate that. Let's get the laptop out every day, and I hated it, and it just really wore me down. So, but I was trying still for the whole year. I was kind of coming up with really short bits. It was very frustrating. And then the year after that was like, right, I'm never doing that again. So now we're just going up, and I'm just going to talk on stage and figure it out on stage. And early on in that one, kind of found that I enjoyed telling the audience that I was an undercover cop, and like that was fun. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do a whole show where I'll do that. And I was just following what I found funny rather than analysing it too much. But then towards the end of that show, kind of discovered that there was this personal thread that I hadn't realised was there, because I've been writing just without thinking about that. But naturally, you write about your actual life, so it became that show for a few years. I did kind of 3 shows on the bounce where it was like, okay, there's a ruse, and then there's a personal reason why I've done this. And like the second one of those shows, I deliberately didn't try and figure out the personal reason at the beginning. I just tried to do it the same as the year before. Did a load of stuff on stage, discovered that what I was enjoying was saying I was doing jury service, but then realised at the end, these routines are all about faith and beliefs, and actually that is a big part of my life, of like, losing my faith when I was younger. So that's what that's about. But then the show after that, the third one, was going into it of like, I want to write a show about wanting a fresh start. So I'll say I'm in witness protection. So then it was a lot more deliberate. After that, it was a really personal show, because I was not in a very good place mentally and found I couldn't speak about anything else on stage. I was trying to write a positive show about the best year of my life. I ended up just talking about the worst year of my life all the time, and I had to accept that that was the show and lean into that. And then this one was just like at the beginning, all I kind of know is I want to let them do whatever they want. And so I start doing work in progress shows, and naturally you start talking about why you're doing that, because they're all wondering. That's the question they've got. Isn't like what happens if we the show up. It's actually, why are you letting us do whatever we want? So you naturally just start talking to them about, here's why, and here's what I've been like in the past, and here's why I think I'm like that. and here's why I'm doing it. And then you just to try and every story out in every work in progress. You do. I do an hour in a venue called the Bill Murray in Angel, in London, and you just go out, on the way there on the train, write a bunch of bullet points, maybe talk about this, maybe tell this story. Don't know where any of the laughs are. Go on stage and just try them all. And the ones that feel right, you just whittle them down as you're going on. And even when you're on tour, certain stories get longer, ditch other ones that aren't pulling their weight anymore. Even when we edited this special, it was like, there were things that we filmed and going like, oh, that's been in the show since the start, but actually now we're watching it, it doesn't need to be there, and we'll get rid of that. That feels great. And already kind of like, having finished doing this one, thinking about the next one and thinking, I want to go about writing it differently, and thinking I'd love to, make sure I film every single work in progress, watch it back, make notes, and try and get back to that more disciplined way of sitting at the laptop and writing stuff and really making as much use of my time as I can so that I don't have to do a million work in progresses, and by the time I go on tour with the finished show, I'm already burnt out because I've done basically 2 tours worth of shows just to get it up to that standard. So I really would like to try and do that and try and write it in a different way, go about creating it in a different way that's more efficient, and hopefully we'll see if it means the show gets better quicker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the way that this one was edited, which I loved, was like, obviously you're a musician, you had the drumming transitions, which to me made it feel so much more kinetic and like almost jazzy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to begin with, I just felt that when I was doing the show on stage, I was like, it felt, this is the heckling show where people can do whatever they like, and I'm just telling a series of stories. And I was like, that feels a bit non-chaotic to me, that I'm just doing a bunch of stories in a row. So I was like, can we get a drum kit on stage? So I was enjoying playing the drums again, and because I was talking a lot about my inner child, I was like, can it be a kid's kit? I was just like, let's just have it there and see how often I go to it and mess around with stuff. And what I found was that I do it at the beginning and the end, but not really much in between the stories, because it would be quite clunky on stage. You get to the end of the story, then you walk behind the drum kit and you start playing. Or even if you tried to walk behind the drum kit as you were wrapping the story up, it feels weird to the audience. It's like, oh, okay, we're about to... They see what's coming, so they're like, I guess this story's fading out now into this. So it just never felt good. But I knew that in an ideal world, I'd have these drums interrupting like heckles and feel like they're cutting in and out of stuff, and it makes it feel more chaotic, which is what I wanted the show to feel like. I kind of knew that I could do that in the edit of this one, but also, well, there's a number of so I knew that we were going to film the show for as long as we needed to on the night without an interval, because I wanted to get all of the material, but I also wanted to make sure we got some heckles, and I knew that I couldn't provoke that myself. I couldn't ask them, heckle me. So I was like, I'm going to not give them an interval, so that should tire them out. So they should heckle because of that, they're irritated. And I'll do it in the round, and hopefully that will encourage them, because I'll have my back to half of them at any one time and they'll feel a bit braver and heckle me. So hopefully that'll work. And I thought if I do all the drumming as they're walking in, that could get them a bit more riled up. And so there was that like extra thing with the drumming, is like, as they're walking in and I'm playing the drums, maybe they'll discover during that it's like, he's not gonna, like, they shout out over the drums and I'm not gonna destroy him, and they get to see straight away. So like, it kind of helped in 2 ways, but like, I knew that we'd use those drums to cover our edit points, so we didn't have to make a 3-hour show, which is now 75 minutes, seem like one smooth show. I didn't want to do that. I didn't see the point in that, and it probably would be impossible anyway. So instead, to use these drum stings and just like, that's the end of that routine, and now we're into the next one, just meant that we didn't have to, worry about, well, I finished that routine and then 20 minutes later I started another one and we're cutting all of this stuff out, and I'm over here, doing this, and I'm suddenly somewhere else. So it's just, this made it easier to edit it. So yeah, it helped in a bunch of ways.
That's awesome. You've had a bit that's obviously gone viral about edgy comedians. In this special, you talk about writing from a place of love versus hate, as opposed to with edgy comedians where it's essentially punching down. Mm-hmm. Where do you try to write from, and what is the kind of comedy that you feel like should be done?
I'd never say the kind of comedy I think should be done, because like I think stand-up is like so diverse and there's so much you can do with it, and like as soon as you hear comics say like, you know, this is what comedy should be, I always think we're suddenly limiting our thing. Even if you're coming at it from a moral standpoint, I think like sometimes people see a comic and they go, there's not enough jokes in that, it's not comedy. And you're like, well, let's not start limiting ourselves here. To like, I think they should be able to get up and do a whole show with very few jokes in, and so much of it is actually quite, you know, hard hitting and serious. That's still very impressive and exciting that someone's done that. And, you know, so like, I never kind of necessarily get like that. I think it's always a shame when there's material that's often material that punches down is quite lazy and just you are kind of going, what we're laughing at here just feels quite mean-spirited, and that's a shame. In school is where a lot of us learn our sense of humour, and it's either like because you're the kids who get picked on and you're doing it to like get out of trouble or to like make friends, or you're the bully, so those, and you know, that's not necessarily the kind of comic you're going to grow up to be either. You could be with the kid who got picked on and now you're the bully comedian, because like that's a survival thing. I think with those comics, it's not a sense of me saying to them, that's not the short, you shouldn't be doing that comedy, you shouldn't say that. It's more that when they do get deserved criticism for it, they don't engage with it and they react as if they're being shut down, and that we're saying to them, never talk about that, don't do it. And actually, a lot of the time people are going, oh, that actually causes a lot of hassle for the people that you're making the jokes about. They're kind of, I know you probably don't think this, but it does make their life worse. And then they're like, you're silencing me. And it's like, no, it's not. So like, I wish that discussion was a bit more, they were a bit more open to that discussion and hearing that. And that's definitely, in terms of the comedy I try and write, I think that the people who raise those issues with comedy, who say like, when you talk about that from your standpoint, here's what it does for this group, and here's how it makes them feel, and here's how it affects those people when they hear it. The people who raise those issues are really useful, and a lot of the time become the voice in your head when you're writing comedy, and you kind of try and just write from your perspective and the way you think. Yeah, like coming from my like position of like privilege, you're right, and you can find yourself going, yeah, and then this is the joke, and then you already have their voice in your head of going like, yeah, but you check yourself immediately while writing it, and I think that's so just useful. It makes you write a better joke. It makes you kind of, and it makes you reassess. Oh, why is my instinct that I'm right in every situation, and actually maybe I'm not, and maybe it's funnier that I'm not, and maybe it's funnier to like, but still now I've got to write that from a position of like where it's clear that I'm the one who's not right, rather than just, okay, I'm not right, so I'll say the wrong thing and then get away with that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, not that I'm trying to write those routines very often, but I think yeah, the answer to your question is that I'm just trying to write from my perspective, and then even during that process, my perspective can change, because the process of writing about your viewpoint forces you to analyze it and assess it and maybe change it at the same time.
Yeah, you have to be open to things changing your perspective. Otherwise, you're going to become a stagnant comedian. You know, and so if people are giving you criticism and you're just like not taking it, and I don't mean you, but you as like the royal you, like as other comedians, like then you are closing yourself off to potentially growing as a person and as a comedian.
Yeah, there's loads of routines that like I've done in the past, and people have come up to me after the shows and gone, here's why that's a problem. It's very, very useful every time. And like, because it makes you go away, think about it. That is not an opportunity for an argument. It is an opportunity, but you don't have to take that opportunity. You can just go, okay, thank you. You go away and think about it. And sometimes you go away and think about it and go, no, I think I'm okay, but I just need to reword this. I didn't get it across very well. But 9 times out of 10, you go, yeah, they're right. But I'm going to change that bit. And then the bit will be better. And isn't that helpful?
There's a lot of comedians have bits that start with like, the craziest thing happened to me last week, and this is totally true.
Yeah. And
I think oftentimes it's not. or at the very least, the truth has been embellished for the sake of comedy. at the end of your special, you're like, okay, this is the one thing that I embellished or that I changed, which I appreciated because the whole time I was thinking, I was like, these stories are amazing. Like, how much of these are embellished? How much of these are true? Where do you feel the line is between like absolute like truth versus embellishing for the sake of the comedy?
Where's the line for that? I think obviously there's certain embellishments where the audience know they're not supposed to believe it. When I say I'm an undercover cop on stage, or I say I was a juror on a murder trial, I would assume most of them are not believing that is true. I did have a journalist back home genuinely confused as to whether I'd done jury service on a murder trial or not. But he's the one exception who's ever believed that show. And then sometimes there'll be stories that are true stories that people then are like, it's not quite funny enough as it is, and they'll change bits. And a lot of the time they can be inconsequential stories that comedians are telling about their day-to-day life. And, funny thing happened on the tube, or I heard this person say this, in a coffee shop. And it doesn't really matter if you change that to be a slightly funnier punchline and polish up what the person actually said, and it gets a bigger laugh in the room. Obviously, I guess the line is when it has real world implications afterwards. You change the thing and then that's going to change how certain people think about something, or change what someone does after a show. And comedy can do that. Someone being on stage and speaking publicly can affect the people who are in the audience afterwards. Not everyone is going to go away and be changed by the show, or value what has been said on stage like that. But like some people are, and some people, even if their opinion just changes a little bit about the subject because you lied about it, there is some responsibility there. So also for me in my shows, especially this one, I'm talking about a lot of things about my parents and real people I know, and I don't want to lie in a way that is funnier on stage but makes them look worse, and then they're like a bit hurt by it, or they're because then that's not more important to me. Totally. People loved it more than my dad being on good terms with me. So there's that as well. But again, it's just real world. When it bleeds into off the stage and into the real world, then maybe don't lie about it.
For sure. You wrote a book about quitting social media.
Yeah.
And right now, there's a huge trend of people leaving social media now. So your book's kind of more poignant now than it was even when you wrote it. What made you quit social?
I was just on my phone too much. I'm still am. So it's not like it's really changed anything. I'm just not looking at social media anymore. I'm now just I'm watching YouTube videos constantly and checking my WhatsApps and my emails and all of this. So, but I didn't feel good just scrolling through other people's arguments on social media all day. That was mainly what I was doing. I was either searching my own name on Twitter and seeing what people thought about me. That's not healthy. Even if it's all good stuff, the fact that you're going and looking for it doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel a bit yucky. And then I just look at arguments other people were having and get wound up about them, rather than maybe thinking about those issues in a bit more of a helpful way, or so I just deleted all of it, and it's definitely better since. But I'm still on my phone too much. I'm still still can get to the end of some days. I'm I've been staring at screens, and I really didn't need to. And I'm not. It's not like I've gone, there's all these things people are arguing about online, and do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to delete these all these apps, and I'm going to read about these issues instead and educate myself and better myself. I'm not doing any of that. I'm watching YouTube videos about 5 things Ryan Gosling can't live without, or whatever. I'm just consuming the most trashy, don't need it in my body stuff. Just so I'm still not. I don't know how much healthier I am. I think I've not gone from a meat eater to a full vegan. I think I'm still chicken and fish kind of guy, and I need to fully get off of it and start putting good things in my body. But,
You're social media pescatarian.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah, I'm still doing all the bad behaviour, but without being on there. So I'm not seeing everyone else's arguments about it, but I'm still putting all the bad stuff in my body.
I first heard of you on my favorite podcast on the planet, Films to Be Buried With.
Brett Goldstein. Yeah. Congratulations, Brett.
And
favorite podcast on the planet.
It is my favorite podcast on the planet.
Yeah.
And you were the first guest, I think, right?
Yeah.
And you've been on like, what, 5-6 times now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do every 100th episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And he said in that first episode that when he was introducing you, that you're the kind of stand-up that's so good he makes stand-ups want to stop doing stand-up.
That's overly nice. Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But there's also been, you know, there's that story of like Eric Clapton hearing Stevie Ray Vaughan play for the first time, then he like went home and like almost quit guitar. Were there any comedians that you've seen that you saw and you're like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah, I don't know. I get more like that when I see a bad comedian, and then I think that's me. So like, I when I see really good comics, it just makes me want to do it again. And I remember being an audience member and watching this amazing comedian and going, oh, what a wonderful thing to do, get on stage and do that. When I see Josie Long, and when I see, like, if we're going to see Nish Kumar now, I'm just like, I don't even know how Nish is doing this. I just feel like an audience member who's never done comedy again. And I haven't even got a thing of like, I need to catch up with him. I'm like, you know, Nish didn't stop gigging all the way through the pandemic. He was following the rules, he was within the guidelines. But he was constantly generating new stuff and working on it. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's lapped me a million times now. I'm not going to catch up with Nish anytime soon, but I'd love to just be working in the same, industry as him. It just excites you to like be involved in that world when you're watching those kind of comedians. It's when I watch someone who's awful that I think like, that I should quit. I think that's me. That's when I feel like that. I watch someone who's just absolutely just like, especially like when they're doing the things that, you know, I was talking about. Yeah, I remember going to see a comedian just like every time the audience were quiet for a joke, being like, "Do you guys even like comedy? Are you even listening to me? Why are you even here?" And I was like, "I need to quit because that's me." And that's when I feel like I need to quit. Just when I see people doing the things that I know I do that's bad, I'm like, yeah, this feels awful as an audience member watching this. If I make people feel like this, I need to quit. Yeah.